Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel, Tales of a Texas Mommy. Today I am going to be doing my birth story. So if you want to hear what happened, then just keep on watching. So it has been 2 weeks since baby girl made her entrance into the world, and y'all, I know everybody always says this, but I cannot believe it has been 2 weeks. It feels like just one long day. I mean, it's there's so much that's happened, but then it seems like not a lot, and my sense of time is just all over the place. So I had a scheduled repeat C-section at 37 weeks and 2 days. I'm really going to try not to get too into the details because I talk about that extensively in my pregnancy updates. I will link that playlist in the description box below. That way y'all can kind of catch up on that. But yeah, it was necessary for me to have a C-section early. They initially wanted me to have one at 34 weeks, but the way things worked out, we were able to wait to 37 weeks, which me and my husband felt more comfortable with. I was absolutely dying to have a natural VBAC, but when it's all said and done, she's here, I'm here, it's fine. The way that, you know, they were talking about a hysterectomy and me losing a lot of blood and being in the ICU, so a C-section or having to have another C-section was the least of my worries because I did have a C-section with my son. Okay, so let's get started. I went in on a Tuesday for my C-section. I was scheduled for 1 p.m., which I was kind of disappointed about because I kind of wanted to do it first thing in the morning just to be done with it. But it also kind of worked out well because we got to spend a few hours with my son before we had to go to the hospital, so that was kind of nice. The huge drawback of having it in the afternoon is I could not eat or drink anything all day. So the last time I ate was, you know, dinner the night before, and I couldn't eat anything or drink. I couldn't even drink water until 1 o'clock. Or not till 1 o'clock, but until, you know, way after the surgery. So by the time we got to the hospital, I was in such a bad mood because I was actually more thirsty than I was hungry. So I was thirsty, I was hungry, and I was sleepy because I was so stressed out and excited about everything. I didn't sleep well the night before, so you got 3 of your basic needs that are not being met, so I was just kind of not pleasant to be around by the time we got to the hospital. I thought it was kind of neat. It actually rained that morning. It also rained the morning that Liam was born, so I don't know, I thought that was kind of neat that it rained both days. So we got to the hospital at 11 a.m. It was me and my husband, and then my sister and my dad came down from Lubbock for the birth. They went straight to the waiting room, and then me and Ben went upstairs to labor and delivery to actually get into a room. We got into the room pretty quickly, and then we had our like our designated nurse come in, and she was awesome. She gave me these wipes that I had to use, and I had to go into the bathroom with Ben, and basically I was kind of like sterilizing myself. So there are these special wipes, and you have to go use like, there's like instructions. You have to go like up one arm with one wipe, the other with another, go downward, and like it's crazy. And the wipes, ugh, they make you feel so like sticky, and they're cold and just ugh. So we did that in the bathroom, and I put on, you know, the hospital gown. I also had to do some antiseptic wash 2 nights before the surgery, which I talked about that I think in my last pregnancy update. So lots of antiseptic and whatever I had to do before the surgery. We did have to sign some paperwork because of my pre-op, I guess the nurse forgot, so we had to sign a little bit of paperwork. I got into bed, and then they hooked me up to those the belly monitors where they kind of monitor baby girl's heart rate, and then also I guess contractions. They actually did say that I was having contractions while I was hooked up, which doesn't really mean anything because you can have contractions like a month or 2 before you go into labor, so it doesn't really mean I was going to go into labor soon. But I thought that was interesting because I obviously didn't feel anything. My doctor came in beforehand just to, you know, kind of say hey. We also talked you know, pretty in-depth with the anesthesiologist. He was really nice. He talked about like just what exactly they were going to do. They were going to try a spinal epidural on me this time, because last time I just did the regular epidural and it didn't take, which is why I had to be put under general anesthesia with my son's C-section. So he talked about the whole process and just, you know, kind of made us feel comfortable with what was going to be happening. There was a handful of nurses that came in that again introduced themselves, because my surgery, my C-section was actually in the main OR, and because they were preparing for an Accreta and lots of blood loss and a possible hysterectomy, they wanted to be 1000% prepared for any scenario. So they had me on the main operating room floor. They also had a bunch of units of my blood type ready to go, and they had just a lot of extra people in the room versus if it was just a C-section, you know, in the labor and delivery area. So that was a little bit different as far as a scheduled C-section goes. So my scheduled time was for 1 p.m. and I could not believe how fast the time went by. From the time we arrived until, you know, they wheeled me off, I couldn't believe how fast everything went. They, you know, wheeled us to the operating room, and of course I was getting pretty nervous. Ben was with me as they did that, and they dropped him off at this, it's like a, I think they called it a surgeon's board, and it basically is like who's in what OR and what's going on and stuff. So they kind of left him up there, and then they actually wheeled me to the OR because they were getting me actually prepped in there, and then they would bring Ben in like right when they were about getting ready to start. Y'all, when I got in there, there was at least 20 people in there. It was a circus. There were so many people in there. Like I said, everything with what they were planning for, they wanted to be prepared. So there was a lot of extra hands in there. At one point, one of the nurses had to like yell for everybody to shut up because there were so many people talking, and it was just, it was kind of chaotic. So this is probably the most interesting part of the experience. So because they were preparing for worst case scenario, they had to give me an arterial line. What my understanding is of what that is where they have to put a line. Basically, their goal is to get it kind of like up in here in this vein right here. And what it does is it detects like drops in blood pressure, and it detects all of your vitals and stuff immediately. So they would know right then if there was an issue with my blood pressure dropping or anything, so that they could act fast if something went wrong. Like if I was under general anesthesia, they wanted to have that in case the worst case scenario happened. So they had to do an arterial line, which they don't usually do with the C-section. That's not common. It took them 3 of their top anesthesiologists, 2 cardiac specialists, and almost 2 hours to get that line in my arm, and it was the worst. It was so bad. My bruises, they've actually pretty much all healed up. You can see a little bit there. I've got a little bit there. You can't hardly see any of these. This is where they actually ended up doing it, is up here in this arm. But yeah, they don't even look close to what they look like before. In my 1 week postpartum update, I showed a little bit of my bruises, and it was so bad because they have to basically, you know, put the needle in, and then they have to like thread your vein through this needle, and it's just, it was so bad. They had a sonogram. I didn't know you could do that, but they had 2 sonogram machines like on my arm so they could see it. Ugh. It's hard to talk about because it was just awful. I had both arms out like this. I had one person on each arm because they were trying so hard to get it. I lost count of how many times they stuck me after probably like 8. They stuck me here probably at least 10 times. I had bruises, like a long bruise, because the needle's going like in your arm, and I mean, you can feel them digging. Like they give you a local anesthetic just for the initial prick, but they're digging in your arm, so who cares about that? Then they tried these veins down here, and then they tried up here. So they tried probably several times on each part of each arm until they finally got it. I mean, y'all, I was like actually screaming out in pain, and I am not a wuss when it comes to pain. I mean, I wouldn't say I have a high pain tolerance, but it's not low, and it was just an involuntary scream. It was so bad. But yeah, they had to actually call in 2 cardiac specialists to come in and help because they could not, I could tell they were getting frustrated because they couldn't get it. And it also didn't help because I hadn't eaten or I hadn't drank anything since the night before, so I was dehydrated. So of course my veins aren't going to be great for getting a stick anyway, because I don't normally have issues with them finding a vein. I was starting to lose hope because I was freaking out because I'm like, okay, they're going to have to put me under general because they're not going to keep trying, because I wanted to be awake so bad for her birth. Mentally, that was the only thing that got me through the torture. That's the best word I can think of for it. Because I knew it was coming. And I'm like, oh, Ben's not going to be able to get in here. Like, it was awful. The nurses could not have been sweeter. I had to close my eyes at one point because I just couldn't, I had to just focus. But at one point when I opened my eyes, I had like 8 people in front of me. I had like 3 nurses across me and like 2 people on each arm. Like, it was insane. I had like 1 nurse wiping my tears from my face. I had 1 nurse like holding my hand. Another one of the nurses, he kept going out to find Ben to let him know what was going on, because I'm sure Ben was like, what is taking so long? Because it was literally close to 2 hours. It was bad. It was so bad. But once they actually got it, the entire mood of the room just shifted, and you could just tell it was way more lighthearted because it was pretty tense there for a while. It was so funny. Pretty much the whole time we were at the hospital, every time we'd have a new person come in the room, they're like, oh, I heard about the A-line. Oh, it was off. Was it awful? Like, they would look at my arms. It was like heard around the hospital, like it was such a big story. And the anesthesiologist, once they got it, he told me, he was like, I have been doing this for 30 years and I have never had such a hard time getting an A-line. So I'm like, well, I guess if you're gonna do it, then go big or go home and have a great story to tell with it. But you could tell he was frustrated, and not at me or anything, but like I said, once they got it, it was fine. But yeah, it seemed like everybody and their mom had heard about it in the hospital, so that was kind of funny because it was like the whole time we were there, people were asking about it, like the nurses and stuff. During all that, you know, I got the shakes really bad. It was freezing in the room, but y'all know if you've watched my pregnancy updates, being cold is not something that I have been dealing with this pregnancy, so I was actually still pretty hot, but I had the shakes just from all the poking and prodding. I also got nauseous a lot. They put some stuff in my IV, and I cannot remember the name of it. Zofran. I think it was Zofran. They put that for nausea. Anyway, they put something in my IV to help with nausea because I kept feeling like I was going to throw up. And that was like 5 or 6 times they had to give me something because I really thought I was going to lose it. They actually put a alcohol swab under my nose, and inhaling the alcohol actually made the nausea go away. So that's a neat trick I didn't know about. So after that ordeal, they did the epidural. So they sat me up and they did the spinal, and you know, you have to kind of hunch over. And that, I swear, took a couple of minutes. Like, it was nothing. And, you know, again, the nurses were there holding my hand, and like, they were so awesome. But yeah, spinal, it took like that. It took so fast that by the time they were laying me down, I couldn't move. They're like, okay, well, let's lay down. I'm like, y'all are gonna have to help me because I really cannot move at all. And I mean, I could feel it was like water just dripping. Like, I could feel, that's how it took over, and then I was completely numb. I definitely did not have that kind of feeling when I had the epidural with my son. So it was a completely different feeling for sure. So after that, they laid me down. They, you know, started setting up, and you know, I was getting pretty excited and also nervous because I'm about to have my stomach and my uterus and my muscles and all this torn open, and I was afraid of how it would feel because, you know, with my son, I was completely put under, so I didn't know what was going on, but I'd always heard that you can feel like pressure and pulling and stuff like that, so I was nervous, understandably. So they started putting, you know, the big sheet up in front of me, and then the nurse, they were like, okay, go get the husband, and I was like, oh, he's coming, so that must mean it's soon. So they came and they got Ben, and he went and sat next to me, and I was like, how long, like, what time is it? Because, you know, when something like that's happening to you, I mean, it seems like it's forever. And he was like, I don't want to tell you, because I think it was like an hour and 45 minutes. It was ridiculous. And then I was like, how many people are in here? He was like, I can't even count. There's so many people in here. But yeah, the bulk of the time I was in the OR was them trying to get that arterial line. That was almost the whole time I was in there. The spinal literally took a couple minutes, and then by the time they got set up, you know, we were sitting there for a while and it was kind of quiet, and I turned to Ben and I was like, have they started yet? And he was like, yeah, because I could not feel a thing. I couldn't feel pressure. Like I could not feel anything. And of course I couldn't see anything because the way they had the drape, it kind of like, it was almost like a hood. Like I could not see a thing. I kind of could feel them kind of like moving my body a little bit. And then my doctor was like, oh, she's here. And then I remember I held my breath because I was waiting to hear, you know, the cry. And I mean, within a couple seconds you could hear her start crying. And I mean, it was just like, you know, she's here, she's, you know, breathing. And so then it was the moment of truth. Is my placenta going to detach? Am I going to need a hysterectomy? Like, now's it. After all these months of stressing out and what ifs and maybes, like, this is it. So then we hear somebody say, okay, go ahead and start the Pitocin. And I was like, because our anesthesiologist told us after they do the C-section, they give you Pitocin. That way your uterus will start to contract and help with, you know, the blood loss and everything like that. So in my mind, I'm like, well, that must mean that there's a uterus and that it's gonna stay. Like, I was just, you know, working through that in my head. And I asked Ben, I'm like, did they get the, you know, did they get the placenta? And he, you know, asked over the curtain, and they were like, yeah, it's out. And I mean, he was like, yeah. And I lost it. I started bawling because it was just like, after all that time of stressing and worrying and just like knowing one way or the other, it was just so, it was so great to just be done and over that hump. But then the fact that we got the news we wanted, that was even better. They took Lucy over to get evaluated. The NICU department was there as well because she's born 37 weeks. So regardless, they had to do that and just kind of evaluate her real quick. She was born at 3:06. So we went back to surgery like at 1-ish, and I mean, she was born probably within 15 minutes after they got that darn line in my arm, so it was pretty quick. So they went and did that over at with the NICU people and did, you know, all that, and then I got to hold her almost immediately. I mean, it was within a couple minutes, because it was a C-section, because she was born early. I didn't get to hold her immediately, but I got to hold her pretty quickly afterwards, and I got to hold her. The nurses were, oh, I cannot tell you how awesome the nurses were. They were like, oh, give me, you know, your phone, let me take a picture. I mean, like, they were taking tons of pictures. Of course, Ben was taking pictures too, but he brought his phone, and I also gave him my phone so that, you know, just in case an extra person could take pictures. But they were like, okay, get in there, Dad. Like, they took a ton of pictures of all three of us, and it was just, it was way more than I could have hoped for. We got to do the delayed cord clamping, which was something that we, you know, wanted to do with Liam also, but just didn't work out that way. We got to do that because you know, the placenta was okay, so we got to wait a couple minutes before cutting the cord. Also, we got to keep the placenta, which, again, it's just more than I could have hoped for. I mean, all this stuff, everything went perfect. It went so much better than I could have imagined. We were going to try to keep the placenta regardless of if I had a hysterectomy or not. We were just going to see if it was salvageable, but, you know, it came out, the doctor said it came out like butter, so it came out awesome. So We got to keep the placenta, and I did the encapsulation, which I've mentioned. But I got to hold her the whole time they were stitching me up. That's probably what took, after doing the arterial line, that's what took the most time, was just them sewing everything up. But I got to hold her the whole time that they were doing that. They took her away again after, I don't know, 30-45 minutes to get her weight and all that kind of stuff, and then they brought her back. I mean, I got to hold her most of the time. I even got to hold her from the operating room to my recovery room, and I held her for like 4 hours after that, and I got to nurse her and all that kind of stuff. So I tried to nurse her in the OR, but the way that the sheet was, and I just couldn't get the right position, and she seemed to be content to just snuggle. So I nursed her, you know, as soon as we got to the recovery room. They did use dissolvable stitches with this surgery with limbs. They did staples. I've heard it really doesn't matter. It's just doctor's preference, but that's what they used this time. So we got to the recovery room, and my dad and my sister were there. My mother-in-law was there kind of during the surgery, but she had to leave because she was going to pick up my son from daycare because he was staying with her while we were in the hospital. So I didn't get to see her right afterwards. But my dad and sister were in the recovery room, and we were there for about 2 hours or so, and they did all the awful, you know, pushing on your uterus, and it was the same nurse that checked us in. So I mean, again, she was awesome. But just being able to be awake during the surgery, not having to come out of that fog of the general anesthesia, I mean, it was heaven. Like, I was just on cloud 9 because I got to hold my baby, I got to put her right on my chest, I got to nurse her on my own. She latched beautifully the first time, and it made such a difference. I mean, my first C-section experience was it was awful. It was just traumatic. The whole labor, I was in labor for 3 days with him, and then it ended in an emergency C-section, and it was awful. I mean, he was fine and I was fine, but emotionally it was awful. So this experience, night and day, just all of it was just so much better. I mean, obviously the leading up to it was scary because I went into the surgery thinking that I was going to have a hysterectomy. So that was just where my head was. So the fact that everything just went so well, we got to do cord clamping, I got to hold her almost immediately, I got to keep the placenta. Like, I could not have asked for a more perfect birth in my eyes. So around 6 p.m. or so, we were moved to the like the postpartum ward, I guess, which is in a different building. So we moved over there. My dad and sister brought all of our stuff up from the car because we didn't bring it because we knew we were going to be moved. So I was in the recovery room for about, or post-op room, whatever you want to call it. I was there about 2 hours, moved up there about 6 p.m. And again, I held her the whole time, you know, in the elevator, all that, I got to hold her. And then around 7 or so, I was like, okay, I'm kind of ready to rest. Like, I mean, that was my way of telling them, okay, let's get out of here. Like, I'm ready to be alone. So, I mean, they took the hint. Like, I mean, it was fine. At that point, she was still on me. I wasn't really ready for anybody else to hold her. Ben held her for a little bit. As, you know, like whenever they were doing IVs and stuff like that, he would hold her. But I mean, I held her for pretty much the most part. Around 8 p.m., I tried for the first time to actually get up out of bed and walk just to the bathroom. I had a catheter still, so I wasn't going to be going to the bathroom, but just to get up and walk. I felt so much better than I did after I had Liam. Like, just my insides and everything felt so much better. Obviously, it still hurts, but I tried getting up and walking, and I couldn't. It wasn't the pain, it was the nausea. Like, I felt like I was gonna pass out. I tried for probably 10-15 minutes, and I was just like, I can't. Every time I would stand up, every time I would try to move, I felt like I was gonna just fall and pass out, and I just felt so sick. So she was like, okay, well, that's fine, we'll just try again later. Because we got up to the room so late, we missed the dinner where they bring the food to your room. So Ben had to go down to the cafeteria area to get us some food. This was around 9 p.m. and I was still just feeling so sick. The nurse had actually left one of those, I guess the barf bags. They're like a plastic with the thing, and anyway, she had left it on the bed, and it was just me and Lucy. I was holding her and nursing her and just, you know, snuggling with her, and just completely by myself. And I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna throw up. And I mean, I threw up a lot. I'm so glad that that bag was there, because it would have been bad. So yeah, luckily that was there. The you know, Ben came back up with the food, which of course at this point I don't want anything to eat. I really wanted to just drink. I was drinking, you know, apple juice and water and stuff like that. But the nurse came back and she actually brought me some of the Zofran to help with the nausea. And it was one of the chewable ones, which I don't know why they give you chewable if you're sick. Like, how is that going to help you? Anyway, I tried to chew one and I threw it up, as like it no sooner hit my throat than I threw it up. I probably threw up like 4 or 5 times that night. So first night was a little rough, and it makes sense. I mean, I had all these drugs and stuff in my system, so the first night was a little rough on Mama, just for all that kind of stuff. The next day, which was Wednesday, around 3 a.m., the nurse came in to take out my catheter. The deal was if I could get up and walk to the bathroom, then she would take it out in the bathroom. So she took the catheter out. Obviously, I was able to make it to the bathroom. And, you know, Lucy fed, you know, just about as often as you would expect during the night. Early that morning, probably around 9 or so, they came by to do her hearing test, and she actually didn't pass in one of her ears. So they're like, sometimes that can happen, especially with C-section babies. They get a little bit of extra fluid behind the ear, so they were going to come back the next morning to check it. So around 9 a.m., the nurse came in, and she's like, okay, we need to go to the bathroom. I need you to pee, or I'm going to have to give you the catheter again. And, ugh, I didn't want another catheter. So I made it to the bathroom okay. This time I didn't get sick like I did the night before. And I tried, and I just could not pee. Like, I felt the urge, and I just couldn't go. Y'all, it took me almost 2 hours. This nurse, she was really nice. She gave me extra time. I tried everything. I tried just like closing my eyes and like visualizing. I tried turning the water on. I tried squirting myself, you know, with the Perry bottle. I was walking up and down the halls. I was chugging water. I could not go. And then feeling like you're on a timetable, because she's like, okay, if you don't go by 11, I gotta do it. Because she was like, I'm giving you extra time, but you gotta go by this time. And I mean, I was stressed out, and then people kept coming in the room, like nurses, and because, you know, when after you have a baby, somebody's coming in your room, it seems like every 15 minutes. So you got, you know, like the birth certificate people come in, and then I think the hearing test people came again, and then somebody came to check Lucy's vitals. And so constantly having people come in, walk by the bathroom. I mean, the door was shut, but just hearing people come in and knock and stuff, like that made it even harder to go. Like, I was getting so irritated. I was about to have Ben just stand outside the door and be like, just wait. Because I couldn't go, and I was stressed out. So anyway, I finally went. After almost 2 hours, didn't need another catheter. But y'all, that was stressful. It was really stressful. I have never tried so hard to pee in my life. So later that evening, my mother-in-law came with Liam, and we actually had her wait in the waiting room, and then had just Liam come in with Ben to meet Lucy for the first time, because we really wanted to do that alone, just family. So, you know, Ben brought him in, and I mean, he just immediately, he wanted to give her kisses and hold hands, and he wanted to sit with her. We had each one of them give each other a gift. Lucy got him this little Tickle Monster book, and it's, if you watch my hospital, what's in my hospital bag, it was in that, and it's just, you know, a book, and it has these little gloves for Tickle Monster. And then he gave her this little unicorn lovey, and it went well. For a 2-year-old, he handled it pretty well. Even later that evening, probably around 8 or so, they came in and did Lucy's weight again, and she weighed 6 pounds 13 ounces, so she had lost 8 ounces since birth, which is normal. That's about a 6% loss. And then even later that evening, she definitely was cluster feeding that night, like pretty much all night. I pretty much stayed awake as much as I could just because she was feeding so often. I was feeling okay. I was really trying to let Ben sleep because he was exhausted. I mean, everybody's exhausted, but I didn't wake him up to put her in the little bassinet they give you, and I'm sure not going to get up every 45 minutes to pick her up and put her down and stuff. So I pretty much just let her lay on my chest, and I was just, you know, on my phone, just kind of up. But she fed a lot that second night. For a good, like, I'd say 12 hours or so after the surgery, I was so itchy. And it was weird because it was like my face was itchy. Like my cheeks and my face and my neck, like I was just so itchy, which I'm guessing is from all the anesthesia, but it was just such a weird sensation. I mean, even like the backs of my ears, like I was just ridiculously itchy. They also gave me a belly binder right afterwards, which is basically just a big old piece of material, and you just do that whole ordeal and it helps you feel a little bit more secure, especially right after the surgery. That was nice. I didn't have that with Liam's birth, so it made it a lot easier to move around because you felt a little bit more held in. You know, this time around I did not have a whole lot of pain as far as the, I guess they're called after pains, the contractions that you get after birth. With Liam, I remember they were pretty bad for, I mean, they were, I had them for at least a couple days after we got home from the hospital, so maybe for almost a week. But with Lucy, I had them for maybe a day or two, and they were not bad, which I was surprised because they always say with each subsequent birth, it gets worse. So I really didn't have it this time. I was still so hot after I had her, which, you know, hormones and all that kind of stuff. I kept our room was freezing. I had like 2 blankets over Lucy, and then, you know, she had her hat and her, you know, little outfits and stuff, and then poor Ben, he's like over in his bed like with a blanket wrapped around. Like I was so hot, and I was like basically naked on the bed with like no sheets. I was just, ugh, I was so hot afterwards. So the third day, which was Thursday, the hearing test people came back and did Lucy's hearing test again, and it was fine. Everything came back normal, which they kind of figured it would. She also passed all of her bilirubin tests for jaundice. They all came back really great. So our hospital does a thing whenever, I guess like the day that you're discharged, they do like a special lunch for mom and dad. So I had the salmon with chocolate cake, and then Ben got the chicken parmesan with some cheesecake. And y'all, this piece of cake, I mean, it was a huge thick piece of chocolate cake with like cherry drizzle, and it was so good, but I only had a couple bites because it was just, it was very decadent. But yeah, that was kind of a special little treat that we had before we went home. We ended up being discharged probably around 2:30, 3 o'clock that afternoon. So Lucy was like right at 48 hours old. We had to wait forever to get discharged. I really don't know what the deal was. Like they were talking about discharging us like around that morning, but I don't know if it was just them taking paperwork, and then by the time that we were actually officially discharged, they had to wait for somebody to come up with a wheelchair, because they have like this huge wheelchair that's got like shelves on the back of it so that you can put all your stuff on it, and it's weird. Anyway, we had to wait. They're like, oh, it'll be about 10 minutes. We were waiting for like 45 minutes for them to come up so we could go. Like we were done. We were so ready to go home. So overall, the experience was just, it was literally night and day from the C-section that I had with Liam. The nurses were absolutely amazing. I really don't know if it's because I got to be awake during this C-section, and during Liam's I was put completely under. I don't know if that had something to do with it, but the recovery has been way easier. I was able to get up and walk around a lot better. I didn't have nearly as much pain. Just everything was just so much better. I got everything I wanted. I got to keep my uterus. I got to hold Lucille right afterwards. I got to keep my placenta. We got to do the delayed cord clamping. Like everything on my wish list, I got to check off. Like I've said, obviously I didn't want a C-section. I mean, who wants to have a C-section? But it was definitely the best of the worst. So if I had to have a C-section, it could not have gone better. I mean, it was just, it was such a great experience. And I feel it kind of redeemed a little bit the terrible experience I had with Liam. Honestly, I'm glad that it's over and I'm on, you know, the other side of everything. I'm so glad I got to keep my uterus, because if you watch any of my updates, you know how stressed out, I mean, who wouldn't be stressed out about it? But I mean, it went so well. Lucy didn't need any NICU time. She's perfect. Everybody's perfect. I'm very grateful, because it just couldn't have gone better. So that is all that I have for my birth story with baby Lucille. She is still asleep in her DockATot, so I will just insert a little video of her sleeping right here so that y'all can see her. But if you like this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel below. I will see y'all in the next one. Bye.